Hello, fabulous Swansboro fourth graders. It is Miss Shearer here. I love you all and miss you so incredibly much. Hope you are all staying safe and well as we are going through all of this together. I am going to read to you a couple chapters of The Toothpaste Millionaire, which was our One Richmond, One book. And I know that my class started it, but we did not get to quite finish it. So I also know it's been a little while. So we'll read the first couple chapters over again just to be as a refresher. And just let you know, if you hear a meow or any jingling, that is my cat Luna in the background. Anytime that I am on a phone call or a video and whatnot, she thinks that I'm talking to her and will often try to talk back. So just to let you know, she may even come up on my lap. We'll see. I think she's currently eating. And food comes before anything else. So we'll find out. Stay tuned. This is the first chapter of The Toothpaste Millionaire by Jean Merrill. Chapter 1. My Friend Rufus. This is the story of my friend Rufus Mayflower and how he got to be a millionaire. With a little help from me. With a lot of help from me, as a matter of fact. But the idea was Rufus's. Rufus's idea wasn't to become a millionaire, just to make toothpaste. He was 12 and in the 6th grade at the time. By the time Rufus goes into the 8th grade this fall, he'll have over $1 million in the bank. I don't suppose you know too many 8th graders who are millionaires, and you wouldn't know Rufus is one to look at him. He still wears the same old blue sweater. First, I'll tell you how Rufus and I got to be such good friends since I'm white and he's black, and this seems to surprise some people. 2 years ago, the company my father works for moved to Connecticut to Cleveland, Ohio. In Connecticut, we lived in the suburbs. You may not believe it, but up to the time we moved to Cleveland, I had never met a black person. There weren't any black families where we lived in Connecticut. But in East Cleveland, where we live now, there are quite a few. East Cleveland is an old neighborhood with big houses and lawns and trees that look 100 years old. My father says you can't buy a new house built as well as those big old houses. Our house in Cleveland has a lot more rooms than our house in Connecticut. There's a room called a conservatory, which is just for plants. And there's a huge laundry room and workshop, which comes in handy when Rufus decided to make toothpaste. I didn't meet Rufus until several weeks after school started. Sometimes it's hard making friends in a new neighborhood, and the kids on my block weren't too friendly at first. It was okay at school, but after school and on weekends, it was lonely. There wasn't anybody to hang around with but my brother James, and he wasn't interested in anything but model cars. If you've ever had a brother who's crazy about model cars, you know this conversation isn't very interesting. You can't even understand it. It's all about camshafts and gear radios and RPMs. I know that if you want to make friends, you have to be friendly. And I tried. There were 2 girls my age, Clem and Josie, who lived in the house next door, and I thought it would be easy to make friends with them. One afternoon, I saw them watching me pick apples from this nice old apple tree we have in the backyard, and I invited them to come over and pick some apples if they wanted, but they said no. Another time, when Clem broke her badminton racket, I called over to ask if she wanted to borrow one of mine, but she didn't. Maybe they didn't like apples or were tired of playing badminton, but I had a feeling it was that they didn't want to be involved with me. Maybe because I was white. One of the nice things about Rufus is this. He doesn't seem to mind that I'm white and he's black. He doesn't even mind that I'm a girl. My brother James, though, can hardly stand it that I'm a girl. And this can be pretty annoying in a 9-year-old boy. With Rufus, I didn't even have to try to make friends. It was as if we had always been from the first day I met him. I was riding my bike to school, and the strap that I used to hold my books on the back of my bike broke. I heard my books go thunking all over the street. Well, I pulled up to the curb and was trying to figure out how to rescue the books. Papers from my notebook were blowing all over the place. Every time I ducked into the street to grab paper, the car started honking the horns. It was rush hour and nobody wanted to stop. Suddenly, this kid on a bike pulls up behind me. He jumps off his bike and runs into the middle of the street and puts up his handkerchief like the traffic cops. "Take your time," he says to me. Then he gets the traffic under control. He helps me up and get all my stuff. Some kids who lived on my street were standing on the sidewalk laughing at the two of us crawling under cars. One of them yelled, "Hey Rufus, you'll be late for school." Rufus didn't pay any attention except to explain to me, "That's my name, Rufus." Rufus tried to fix my broken book strap, but when he tied it together, it wasn't long enough to go around all the books. "Never mind," he said. "I'll put them in my saddlebags." Rufus had these beautiful blue nylon saddlebags that fit over the carrier of his bike. "Those are neat," I said. "Where'd you get them?" "Made 'em," Rufus said. He stuffed my books in the top of the saddlebags. "Can't spill out of there," he said. "Come on, we'll see who's late for school." He waved at the kids on the sidewalk as we zoomed past them on our bikes. When I pulled up beside him at the red light, Rufus said, "I'll make you some if you get the material." "Some what?" I said. "Saddlebags," Rufus said. "You can get waterproof nylon in red, orange, blue, or black at Vince's Army and Navy." At the next traffic light, he said, "You don't need to buy leather for the straps. I've got some left over from making my saddlebags. All you need is the nylon." And here is the picture. You can see them running all over trying to grab all of those papers. All right, chapter 2. 2 notes from Rufus. Rufus was in my math class. I hadn't noticed him before the day he picked up my books, so I was surprised when he walked into math class later the same day. Halfway through the class, someone behind me passed me a note. It said, "You will need 2 1/4 yards of 36-inch wide nylon, which are 97 cents a yard at Vince's, which will come to $2.18 1/4 plus sales tax." At the end of the note was a neat little drawing. It showed a pattern for the saddlebag laid out on the 36-inch wide material with the length and width of each piece carefully marked. I was turning around to let Rufus know that I got the note when Mr. Conte, our math teacher, called out my name. "Kate McKinistry," he said, "will you please bring that note to me?" Mr. Conte's way of cutting down on notes in his class is to read aloud every single one he spots going around. It was just my luck to get caught with the first note anybody had ever passed me in his class. The kids around me were snickering. There hadn't been a juicy note to laugh at for a week. And I guess because I was a new kid, everyone was watching to see how I'd manage in a tight spot. The last thing I wanted to do was to get Rufus in trouble. I tried to look innocent and said, "It's not exactly a note, Mr. Conte." "What exactly is it?" Mr. Conte asked. Felt my face getting red, but I stuck to my explanation. "It's a kind of math problem," I said. "Then I'd be even more interested to see it," Mr. Conte said. There wasn't anything I could do except take the note up to Mr. Conte. He read it to himself, then looked up kind of surprised. "Believe it or not," he said to the class, "it is a math problem. The answer looks right, but I think we'd better check it out." And what happened then was that Mr. Conte went to the chalkboard and copied off Rufus's pattern for the saddlebags. He wrote in the measurements for each piece of the pattern, 16 by 14.5 and 16 by 8 1/4 and so on. Rufus had everything down to the fractions of an inch. Then Mr. Conte asked the class, "How many yards of 36-inch wide material would you need to cut out of all the pieces for this pattern? And how much will the material cost at 97 cents a yard?" And there's the picture. The class groaned. Somebody wanted to know what the pattern was for. That stumped Mr. Conte. "A blouse, I suppose," he said. He checked with me. "A blouse?" I said. "Yes, a blue blouse." I hoped Rufus wouldn't think I was making fun of him. I sneaked a look at the back of the room, but I couldn't tell what Rufus was thinking. He was scrunched over his notebook as if he were working very hard on the problem. The answer looked very simple the way Rufus had the pattern all drawn out within the note, but it took the rest of the class a whole period to work out their answers. And everyone's answer was different. The class had the nylon costing anywhere from $2.91 up to over $10, partly because no one could figure out how to fit the pieces of the pattern on the material without wasting a lot of the cloth. I never did have to tell Mr. Conte who wrote the note. I think he may have had an idea, though, because Rufus's answers were the only ones that matched those in the note. When I went to pick up my bike after school, there was another note taped onto the handlebars. In this note were 2 maps. One map showed how to get to Vince's Army and Navy on Merchant's Row, and the other showed how to get to Rufus's house from Vince's. Rufus lived only about 3 blocks from me. I rode straight down to Vince's after school. The store was in a part of town where I'd never been before, but Rufus's map was very easy to follow. I got 2 1/4 yards of the same blue nylon that Rufus's bags were made of. Then I followed the other map to his house. I didn't know if Rufus expected me to show up with the nylon so soon, but when I knocked at the door, Rufus's mother said, "You must be Kate. Rufus is in the kitchen." In the kitchen, Rufus had a pattern for the saddlebags all laid out. He'd already cut out the leather straps to fasten the bags with and had put buckles on the straps. Rufus gave me some pins and told me to pin the pattern shapes to the nylon. Then he cut out the pattern and set up his mother's sewing machine and sewed all the pieces together. But I still wouldn't have believed it if you had told me that within a year and a half, Rufus would be a millionaire. My father said it should have been obvious to anyone who could figure it out. Within 1/4 of a yard, how much material you needed for a saddlebag could make $1 million making toothpaste. By supper time, the saddlebags were finished. I was amazed. But I'd never known anyone before who could make saddlebags, let alone toothpaste. All right, it has now been about 10 minutes, so that is the end of our 10-minute Reload for today. When we rejoin, we will start at chapter 3. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves, taking care of your families, and staying safe and well. I love you all. I miss you every day. Think about you all the time, and hope that we can do some video chats sometime later, like maybe another lesson. We'll see. Love you all. Talk to you later.